After being reborn, I no longer stood in the way of Evelyn and her childhood sweetheart. She gave all her wages to him to support his dreams, while I used the money I earned through hard work to invest in my own future. When she got pregnant and gave birth to his child, I quietly bought a southbound train ticket. Later, she told me that if I agreed to adopt the child she had with him, she would marry me. But it was too late. Armed with memories from my previous life, I had already earned my first pot of gold. This time, I chose to let them go and live for myself. Vic, you've always performed well at our factory, but profits are down this year. I'm sure you understand, the supervisor said. Hearing those familiar words made my head spin. Just moments ago, I had been lying on a hospital bed, waiting for death. But now, I was back 30 years in the past. Looking at the supervisor's insincere smile, my chest ached with bitterness, but also a strange joy. I had been given a second chance. In front of me was a voluntary resignation form. Just a few lines, and I'd lose everything I had worked for. I stared blankly for a moment before saying, I've worked hard for this factory. My evaluations have always been excellent. You can't fire me on your own, can you? Evelyn's face flashed through my mind. Even though I knew the answer, I still asked. The supervisor hesitated, then sighed. Victor, this has always been a family matter. I'm just following orders. He didn't need to say it. I understood. Evelyn was behind it. She had always looked down on me, thinking I was uneducated and only had my job because of family connections. She, on the other hand, was a college graduate, beautiful, smart, admired by everyone. If our mothers hadn't arranged an engagement when we were kids, our paths would never have crossed. The man she truly loved was her childhood sweetheart, Domingo the golden boy who studied abroad. I had never really existed in her heart. Realizing this lifted a weight off my shoulders. I looked at the supervisor and smiled faintly. All right, I'll sign. He blinked in surprise, clearly not expecting me to agree so easily. Victor, maybe talk to your family first. You're talented. Be ashamed to leave. I shook my head and looked out the window. No need. The world is big. Guy want to see it. He looked confused. Other factories might not be as good as ours. Things will improve here. I smiled a little wider. You can't explain winter ice to a summer insect. Couldn't understand that the country was changing fast, and this layoff was just the beginning. Soon, factories everywhere would collapse, and by then, it would be too late for most to adapt. I packed my things, took the notice, and left the dormitory. On the bulletin board, my name was right there on the layoff list. Evelyn, can't you even wait a little longer? I thought bitterly in my previous life I had begged everyone I could to keep my job. I didn't want to lose my only source of income, more the dignity that came with it. That job was the only thing that made me feel equal to Domingo. Evelyn had it all: beauty, education, a good family. She was every man's dream. I refused to let her go, even when she treated me like nothing. Back then, during the layoffs, I worked harder than anyone, and even pushed Domingo out to secure my position. But once Evelyn realized what I had done, her attitude turned cold. Even after we married under pressure from her mother, she refused to share a room with me. She preferred to sleep in the factory's crowded dormitory rather than at home. We spent years like that, barely seeing each other except in meetings. Then one day, she returned from a 2-year business trip with a 2-year-old boy she said she had adopted. Since we had no children of our own, I accepted him as my son. I gave him everything I could, no matter how hard it was. But he never wanted to be near me. He always ran to Evelyn after school, and I thought it was normal for a boy to prefer his mother. I didn't know the truth until the day I died, that the boy I raised as my son was actually Domingo's child. For 30 years, my wife had carried another man's child, and I had lived my whole life in ignorance. All those years, Evelyn's business trips were really spent with Domingo. After he lost his job, he caught the wave of the economic reforms. And Evelyn, wanting to help him succeed, willingly took on the role of housewife. What I never expected was that she would leave their child in my care. While I got up at dawn and worked late into the night taking care of their son, the two of them traveled the country together, leaving their footprints at every famous tourist spot. My own life was simple and repetitive, just work and home. Even when Mrs. Lin grew old, I was the one who took care of her. When I finally learned the truth, the shock was too much. I fell ill and lying in that hospital bed. I finally understood what it meant when people said, "There is no greater sorrow than a heart that has died." I had thought that even if Evelyn treated me coldly, I was still her husband. I believed that if I was loyal and kind enough, one day she would finally see my worth. Even when people pitied, mocked, or laughed at me, I never regretted it. They called me weak, a man who couldn't control his wife. Some even used me as an example of failure, but I ignored it all. Only when I was lying on my deathbed, barely alive, did I feel real regret. Evelyn came to the hospital with the boy I had raised, the one whose diapers I'd changed, the one I'd fed with my own hands. She wasn't there because she cared. She came because as my wife, it was her duty to arrange my burial. The boy walked up impatiently and asked, "Dad, where's the bank book?" I forced my eyes open, my chest burning with anger, and said through gritted teeth, "Get out. I'm not your father." They wanted to take everything from me, but I refused. When I knew my time was near, I donated everything I owned. Even in death, I wouldn't leave them a single penny. And yet even then, looking at them, my heart still ached. Why had I wasted my entire life on one woman? Was it really worth it? One afternoon, as I was walking home, an old lady from the courtyard stopped me, her face glowing with envy. "Victor, you're so lucky. I saw Evelyn bringing home a radio and a television today. Those are treasures. Come on, let's see." I wanted to tell her not to bother, that those things weren't for me, but the words stuck in my throat. I just let her drag me home. The Lin family's house was the grandest in the alley, 3 bedrooms, bright and spacious. Evelyn rarely came home, and today was no different. There was no television anywhere. The old lady frowned, then gave me a knowing wink. "Is it in your room?" she asked. Before I could answer, a voice came from next door. "Evelyn, you're amazing. With a TV, I can teach you English now." The old lady's eyes widened in fury. She grabbed my arm and kicked open the neighbor's door. That was the first time I'd seen Evelyn since my rebirth. She was gently wiping sweat from Domingo's forehead, her face soft with affection. Domingo looked up and smiled smugly when he saw me. "Victor, perfect timing. Evelyn just gave me a television. I'll cook for you tonight. As thanks, join us." Domingo was handsome, tall, confident, dressed sharply in a shirt and suit. His collar opened just enough to show the muscles underneath. When I looked at Evelyn, I noticed her slightly rounded belly. I finally realized how foolish I had been. She wasn't just gaining weight. She was pregnant. Before I could say anything, the old lady beside me snapped, "So the expensive TV was for him." Evelyn frowned. Him? He didn't even finish high school. How would he understand how to use a television? Domingo is studying for graduate school and tutors me in English. Of course, he needs it more. Domingo lowered his head toward her, his eyes full of love. The old woman looked at me, clearly urging me to speak. I looked at the TV and smiled faintly. With the memories from my past life, I no longer cared about material things, but I wasn't going to let Domingo enjoy them freely. "Funny," I said. "For someone who studied overseas, why is he taking postgraduate exams here? If my education is so low, shouldn't I be the one studying more?" A guilty look crossed Evelyn's face. She knew that I had been laid off because of her, and that I needed opportunities to learn more than anyone. But she dodged, saying, "Let's talk about it later. When I get next month's paycheck, you can buy one yourself." "What about the coupons?" I asked. "You need coupons to buy electronics, remember?" She fell silent. Back then, coupons were rarer than cash-only full-time employees received them. Under the old lady's sharp gaze, Evelyn forced a smile and turned to Domingo. "I'll see if I can get you another one later, okay?" Domingo's expression darkened. He unplugged the TV, carried it into the yard, and said coldly, "If Victor doesn't want the gift, then forget it. I'm not wasting my money on you again." He slammed the door shut. Evelyn's face twisted in anger. "Are you happy now? Fighting over a TV? When did you get so petty?" I ignored her and turned on the television, switching it to the state news broadcast. The screen flickered to life's glow, reflecting the quiet resolve in my eyes. That channel was full of potential business opportunities. When I didn't react, Evelyn grew frustrated and stood up to block the screen. I warn you, since you took the television, the chance to stay at the factory must go to Domingo. That caught my attention. I hadn't even pressed her, and she had already walked right into the trap herself. Since you brought it up. Team leader Lynn, I said calmly. Let me ask in terms of performance, experience, and skill. I'm far stronger than Domingo in every way, so why am I the one being laid off? Evelyn's face turned sour, annoyance flashing across her expression. What else could it be? Even if you lose your job. Once we're married, my salary will be enough for both of us. Domingo just got back to the country. He doesn't know how things work here. If he's laid off, he'll struggle to survive. Can't you show a little compassion? I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Did I look that desperate to live off someone else's earnings? I knew perfectly well I could support myself. Yet she had arranged for me to lose my job and insisted she'd take care of me with her wages. Words rose to my lips, but I swallowed them. What was the point? When I stayed silent, Evelyn assumed I agreed, and her expression softened. Starting next month, I'll give you 10 yuan a month for living expenses, she said. The rest I'll lend to Domingo. He's just come back and isn't used to the local food. A cold smile flashed in my mind, though my face stayed blank. Alone? She probably never planned to get it back. Besides, she'd eventually have to marry him, have children, raise them. The debts would only pile up. But that was her business, not mine. Do whatever you want, I said flatly. Evelyn gave me a rare, gentle smile. If you can understand, that's perfect. Domingo and I grew up together. I can't just ignore him when he's struggling, right? Without even looking at her, I replied, You care so much for him. Are you saying if he wanted a child, you'd help with that too? Her face turned red as if I'd hit a nerve. What nonsense are you saying? If you talk like that again, don't blame me for turning against you. The conversation ended on a sour note. I didn't care much. I had already lost my job, and finding work was now my top priority. When the neighbors heard I'd been laid off, they came over to comfort me. It's okay, they said. Evelyn earns well. She can support the family. True to her word, Evelyn handed me 10 yuan the next day, then shamelessly moved into Domingo's house. Through the low courtyard wall, I could clearly hear his voice drifting over. Evelyn, I cut up some fruit. Come try it, Evelyn. Do you have any clothes to wash? I'll do them for you. Evelyn, I don't feel like going to the factory tomorrow. Take the day off. Let's go out together. Her sweet voice mingled with his, and I pretended not to hear. I focused on my own work. One day I told myself I would leave this place behind. While packing my things, I found 2 brand new dresses at the bottom of the wardrobe. My calm heart rippled for a moment. I had bought those for Evelyn back when I first started working, saving every penny. But she had never worn them, not even once. They looked untouched. What a waste. I might as well sell them. As that thought crossed my mind, another idea sparked. In my previous life, right after our marriage, a new clothing trend had swept across the country. Fitted collared shirts had become so popular that stores couldn't keep up with demand. This time, I could get ahead, buy stock early, sell it, and seize the opportunity. I acted immediately. I broke open my piggy bank 500 yuan, all my savings, and went south to purchase a large batch of clothes. When I returned home, surprisingly, Evelyn was there. Where have you been these past few days? She asked. I ignored her and kept sorting. She walked into the kitchen, frowning at the dusty counters. You didn't even cook? How ironic. She hadn't been home for half a month and dared to complain. When I didn't respond, she grew angrier and yanked the clothes from my hands. You're home now, and you can't even cook a meal? I shot her a cold look. If you want food or someone to vent at, go next door. I don't have time for either. Her expression darkened. After a moment, she changed the subject. Aren't you supposed to be studying? What's the point of wasting time on clothes? Her tone dripped with contempt. Clearly, as a self-proclaimed top student, she looked down on what I was doing. She didn't realize my so-called studies were just an excuse to take back the television. I had long accepted that I wasn't cut out for school. At least I knew myself. Seeing she was about to start nagging again, I set the clothes aside, irritated. If you've got time to waste, why not check next door? I've been hearing clanging all afternoon, no idea what they're up to. Though the noise had stopped, Evelyn immediately jumped up and ran out. I thought I'd finally have peace. But soon she came rushing back. That surprised me. She usually avoided home as much as possible. So why was she running back and forth today? Then she spoke, and I understood. My mom called. She heard you got laid off and wants us to get married quickly. I had been planning to talk to Mrs. Lin about breaking off the engagement, but it seemed she was already getting impatient. I stayed quiet, waiting for Evelyn to state her terms. Sure enough, after a moment of hesitation, she said softly, "Could you tell Mom to delay the wedding until next year?" "I really don't have the time right now," I sneered inside. Of course she didn't. She was busy juggling 2 men. But I didn't bother to expose her. I just nodded. "Fine. Tomorrow, I'll explain everything to Auntie Lin," I said calmly. At my words, Evelyn's expression instantly softened. She even started humming as she left, her steps light and carefree. Soon after, I heard the door next door open and close again. I let out a long breath, a cold smile tugging at my lips. Of course I'll go see Mrs. Lin, but not to delay the wedding, to end it once and for all. Evelyn, the next morning, just as the sky began to lighten, I got out of bed. The labor market stalls weren't yet reorganized. You went late, you'd miss your spot. After a quick breakfast, I slung my bundle over my shoulder. Inside were the wholesale clothes I'd bought, along with the dresses I had once gotten for Evelyn. Before leaving, I also took the silver coins Mrs. Lin had given me when we got engaged, just as I was about to step out. Evelyn returned shockingly with breakfast in her hands. Seeing me packed and ready, her brows furrowed. "So early? Where are you going?" I found it strange too. Normally, she ate breakfast with Domingo, but I didn't care enough to ask. "I've got something to do," I said, moving toward the door. She suddenly ran forward and grabbed my arm. "So early, what could you possibly have to do?" "Eat first. Domingo made this especially." I let out a quiet, mocking laugh. Whether he made it or not, what does that have to do with me? To my surprise, Evelyn didn't get angry. Instead, she sighed softly. "I thought about it. Letting you face my mother alone doesn't seem right. After breakfast, we'll go together," I shot back without thinking, afraid I'll change my mind at the last minute. Her pupils shrank, and she couldn't meet my eyes. "No, I just don't want you to get lost. I'll take you." Over the past 2 years, I delivered food to her mother countless times. Evelyn knew that perfectly well. Yet she used such a clumsy excuse. It was obvious Domingo must have said something to her last night. That's why she was worried I'd change my mind. The sky was growing brighter and I was running out of time. If I wasted any more with her, I'd lose my stall at the market. I pulled my arm free. "No need. I can find my way. If you're that worried, ask your mother after I return." Without looking back, I walked away. Behind me, I heard her shout, "You're not even eating breakfast." I ignored her. I'm a man, not a dog. Just because she throws me a bone doesn't mean I have to wag my tail. On my way to the market, excitement and nerves mixed inside me. They called it a market, but it was really a black market. Stalls like ours weren't officially allowed. Luckily, everything went smoothly. Even though my clothes were pricey, they sold fast. In no time, everything was gone. When I counted the 300 yuan in my hands, joy flooded me. Pure profile, almost a year's wages. Right after I went to see Mrs. Lin. Standing at her door, I hesitated. She had always treated me kindly, like family. She was the one who arranged the engagement and often said she hoped Evelyn and I would live happily together. She treated me almost like her own son. But this time, I didn't want to be her son-in-law anymore. When I entered, her face lit up with a warm smile. But the moment I told her I'd come to break off the engagement, her smile vanished, replaced by anger. That girl again? Was this her idea? She made you lose your job and now wants to call off the marriage too? Outrageous. She glared at me. Don't worry, Victor. I'll talk sense into her. I shook my head and smiled faintly. Auntie Lynn, it's not because of her. I don't want to marry her. Mrs. Lynn froze. She couldn't believe those words came from me. That alone showed she thought marrying her daughter was somehow a privilege for me. Victor, are you serious? I nodded. Yes, Auntie. I don't want to live here anymore. I plan to head south and build my career. If I marry now, I'll just have ties holding me back. A man should fight for his own future. She was silent for a while, her eyes full of doubt, but eventually she nodded slowly in understanding. Just as I expected, if I had blamed Evelyn, she wouldn't have accepted it. But since I made it about myself, she had no choice but to agree. Seeing her nod, I took the silver coins from my bag and placed them in her hand. Auntie, I can't take these. I do have one small request, though. I may need to stay in that house temporarily, but don't worry, I'll move out soon. And as for breaking the engagement, I'll tell her myself. Mrs. Lynn's eyes were filled with pity and guilt. All right, she said softly. Don't worry about the house from now on. That's your home. I gave a faint, bitter smile. A place with Evelyn in it, how could that ever be called home? By the time I returned, night had already fallen. My house was dark, but next door glowed brightly. As soon as I turned on my lamp, I heard footsteps approaching. Moments later, Evelyn pushed open my door and stepped inside. You're back. Did you talk to my mom today? I ignored her, busy jotting numbers in my notebook. When I left Mrs. Lynn's place, she had slipped me in note names and addresses of her old classmates who worked in the South and could help me find a job. I counted my money carefully. If I saved just a bit more, I could finally go south to Guangzhou. The thought made my heart race, a faint smile forming without me realizing it. Then I noticed Evelyn still standing there watching me. Her brows furrowed. Didn't you hear me? I asked if you talked to my mom today.
Don't worry,
I said simply. I told her what I needed to say, and she agreed. My voice was calm. Evelyn stared at me for a few seconds, then her expression softened. She nodded slowly. This time, it's been hard on you. I'll make it up to you later. Before I could answer, the door burst open. Domingo walked in without knocking. The moment he saw Evelyn sitting close to me, a flash of irritation crossed his face. Evelyn, why are you still here so late? Why not go home? Home. The word almost made me laugh. This was Evelyn's home to begin with, yet she couldn't bring herself to stay in her own house. I'll be back soon. Don't worry. Evelyn's face softened. Her voice gentle as she walked to Domingo's side and comforted him. Then she returned to sit down again. Domingo took a seat too, his gaze sweeping across the room. When his eyes landed on the pile of wholesale clothes I had bought, they lit up. Victor, these clothes look nice. You bought them? Evelyn frowned beside him. Exactly. Why'd you buy so many? Got extra money lying around? I said nothing and started gathering the clothes together. Domingo suddenly smiled, as if he'd thought of something. Evelyn, I'm new here and don't really know the market. It's easy to get ripped off. Since Victor has so many clothes, why don't we ask him to give me a few? Evelyn didn't even hesitate. No problem. He usually does rough work anyway, he doesn't need to dress up. She turned to me, her eyes expectant. You're not going to wear all of them. Pick a few for Domingo later. Disgust rose inside me, my brow tightening. I hadn't wanted to argue, but if they insisted on trampling all over me, I saw no reason to stay polite. I pointed straight at the door. Take your pretty boy and get out. Evelyn froze. It was the first time I had ever spoken to her like that. She sat there, staring blankly, her eyes reddening as if she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. At last, Domingo broke the silence. Looking slightly offended, he said quietly, Since Victor doesn't welcome me, I'll leave first. He stood up slowly and headed toward the door. Evelyn didn't stop him. She just kept staring at me as if she hadn't even heard him. At the doorway, Domingo finally turned around. Evelyn. She blinked, snapping out of it, but still didn't look at him. Go ahead, she said faintly. Domingo's face darkened. He seemed like he wanted to say something more, but but stopped himself and left. That left only Evelyn and me in the room. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. Neither of us spoke. After a long silence, Evelyn finally took a deep breath. I really don't understand why you have to pick on Domingo about everything. His parents died early and he studied abroad alone. It hasn't been easy for him. We've been neighbors for years. Can't you show a little sympathy? I let out a cold laugh. So what are you saying? That I killed his parents? Why should I give in to him for everything? Her face twisted with anger. She glared at me, voice sharp. Victor, are you even a man? Can't you be a little more generous? I laughed bitterly. My fiancé spends every night at another man's house and I'm not generous enough? Evelyn snapped, jumping to her feet. Don't talk nonsense. Domingo and I are clean weave. Never done anything. I shrugged, my tone casual. When there's already a child, what's the point of claiming to be clean? Ridiculous. That was the last straw. Evelyn stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The room finally fell silent again, and I welcomed the peace. The next morning, just as I was about to leave, I could hear the steady sound of Evelyn's breathing through the wall. She was still asleep next door. I was surprised, but I didn't think much of it and went out anyway. Over the next month, I left early and came home late. Life was steady, even dull. The only thing that changed was that Evelyn began coming home more often. Sometimes she even brought takeout meals. But I stayed indifferent. I ignored her every time. Her expression always looked complicated before she quietly turned and left. I thought she was going back to Domingo's place, but several times when I opened the door, I saw her just sitting in the living room. Lost in thought, I didn't bother with her. I focused on my work. Domingo, on the other hand, sometimes made loud noises next door on purpose, probably trying to get my attention. Evelyn would rush over, but before long, she'd return again. That strange routine went on for 2 months. Then, one afternoon, while I was napping, the door suddenly slammed open so hard it hit the wall. I opened my eyes just in time to see Evelyn storming in, a basin of cold water in her hands. Without a word, she threw it straight at me. Ice-cold water drenched me from head to toe. You damned bastard. She screamed. I didn't want to fight with you. We've gone to far spreading rumors about Domingo all over the factory, even sabotaging his bicycle so he'd break his leg. You're vicious beyond belief. The freezing shock left me momentarily stunned. Her voice rang in my ears, shrill and furious. I forced myself up and shoved her aside. Are you out of your mind? I haven't even been to the factory lately, and I certainly never went into Domingo's yard. What proof do you have for any of this? Evelyn's face twisted with spite. Still denying it? Aunt Ma from the alley saw you? You were tampering with Domingo's bicycle yesterday. My frown deepened. Last night, I had indeed run into Domingo near the alley entrance. He'd been pushing his bike, saying the chain had come off, and asked if I could help fix it. I hadn't paid him any attention and just walked away. Now, they were turning that against me. I met her glare coldly. I've got nothing to hide. If you want to smear me, think again. With that, I pushed past her, stormed out of the yard, and kicked open Domingo's door. Evelyn ran after me, startled, and tried to stop me, but I didn't care. I went straight to Domingo's bedside. He was curled up on the bed, clutching his leg and howling in pain. When he saw me, his face turned pale with panic. Who told you to come? Don't come near me. I sneered, closed the distance, and slapped him hard across the face. You shameless dog, you asked for it, so don't blame me for being ruthless. Evelyn screamed and shoved me away. You're insane, Victor. You actually hit someone. Her outrage only made me smirk. First of all, let's be clear, I didn't hit a person. Second, he started it. If he got hit, he deserved it. Evelyn, open your damn eyes. Those 2 slaps were his doing. Evelyn stood frozen, speechless. She had never seen me this furious before. In my previous life, I had tolerated everything for her, swallowing every humiliation. But in this life, I refused to suffer again. Domingo clutched his swollen cheek, trembling at the foot of the bed, too afraid to speak. Evelyn held him, her face full of pity as she whispered softly, "I'm sorry. I was late." Then she turned to me and yelled, "Hurry up and apologize to Domingo." I glared at her coldly. Apologize? For what? If he hadn't asked for it, he wouldn't have been hit. After that incident, Evelyn moved all her things into Domingo's house. From that day on, she didn't say a single word to me. I could tell she thought her silence would punish me. What she didn't realize was that I actually preferred it that way. But while I ignored them, Domingo wasn't satisfied. One day he swaggered over again, leaning against my doorway with a cup of coffee in hand, his face smug. "This is imported civet coffee," he said mockingly. "Evelyn bought it especially for me. I bet some people around here have never even smelled it before, huh?" He took a slow sip, savoring it, then smiled wickedly. "You probably don't know, do you? She's carrying my child now. Victor, her body and her heart belong to me. What right do you have to compete with me anymore?" His face twisted with arrogance, nothing like the so-called gentleman he pretended to be. At that moment, I finally understood something, whether in my past life or this one, I was never the one unworthy of Evelyn. It was her, a woman without conscience or loyalty, who deserved a man like him. I looked at him calmly. "I'm not fighting you for her. Congratulations, you've won yourself a worthless woman. My world is much bigger than this." The past standing before the two of them always made me feel small. They had better family backgrounds, higher education, more polish. Around Evelyn, I always wanted to prove myself arrogant but insecure. But now I saw it clearly. From the beginning, this was just their dirty little game, rotten from the inside. And I had been the fool who walked straight into it, turning myself into their victim. The truth was, there were far more important things waiting for me. Even if life had no grand meaning, making money was enough. My calmness threw Domingo off completely. He stared at me, wide-eyed and confused. "What do you mean by that?" I didn't bother to explain. I just smiled faintly and walked back to my room. The next day, I bought a train ticket, heading south, departure in 2 days. As I held that ticket, my heart filled with anticipation. I packed my belongings, sold what I could, and gave the rest away. By the time I was done, the room was bare no trace that anyone had ever lived there when I finally boarded that train. A sense of freedom and peace washed over me like never before. 2 days and 2 nights later, I arrived in the sweltering city of Guangzhou. Thanks to the note from Lynn's mother, I found her friend and made contact. Once I settled in, I began looking for business opportunities. It didn't take long before I had my own small factory and, soon after, my own home. When I earned my first real profits, the very first thing I did was send money to Lynn's mother to thank her. But a week later, I received a letter not from her, but from Evelyn. Every line dripped with false affection. She wrote about how much she missed me, how she wanted to bring me home, how she wanted to bear my child. I tore the letter apart and threw it straight into the trash. A page full of lies only, a fool would believe them. After that, Evelyn stopped looking for me. She sent letters for about half a month, then fell silent. A month later, I received another letter, this time from Mrs. Lynn. That was how. I learned Evelyn was dead. She had died at Domingo's hands. When she tried to abort the baby and leave him, Domingo fired from the factory and, desperate, snapped. On his way home from work, he kidnapped her and butchered her to death. 2 lives ended that night. Afterward, he jumped from a building. When I heard the news, I felt nothing. In this life, Evelyn finally got what she wanted. She could rot in the gutter with the man she loved. Meanwhile, my business grew. Before long, my factory spread across the entire South. I eventually met a woman I truly cared for, married her, and built a family. This time I lived only for myself.